live in a time of decline. And then when an empire declines, which is something we haven't gone through because empires don't decline very often. But let me tell you from the history books, a little bit we can tell, it's not fun to be in a declining empire. Much more fun when the empire's going up, which was the last century or a century and a half of this country, the ride up. We are now on the ride down. China is winning. We are losing.
Richard Wolff, the famous economics professor from the University of Massachusetts, has come out and said that the fall of America is upon us. Now, is this true? To understand the argument, we need to rewind to the Vietnamese War. Do you remember what happened in what they call the Land of the Dragon?
Just to give you the context, the United States lost the war in Vietnam. When I say that in my classes, my students look at me, they never heard such a thought. America, as they know from the comic books they read as children, only wins wars. It doesn't lose wars.
Well, if we read through the history books, we find out that it's true. In 1973, American troops were forced to leave Vietnam, and in 1975, the Communist Party of North Vietnam captured Saigon, marking the official win for the Communists. But this was not the only war that America lost. In 2021, the US withdrew its forces from Afghanistan after 20 long years in the country, fighting against the Taliban, who now run Afghanistan. As Wolff said, that's a pretty good sign that America lost. In Iraq, it was a similar story where the US were forced to withdraw in 2011. These are not the types of things that you generally hear from an empire at the peak of its powers. Normally they can just easily win and have their own way.
Let me give you a couple of more, just bits of getting what decline means. Last week, something happened on the part of a country called Indonesia. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's a remarkable country in Asia made up of 18,000 islands in the Pacific. It's a huge country. The population of Indonesia is 280 million people. Makes it one of the largest countries in the world. Let me remind you, the population of the United States is 330 million. 280 isn't that far less than 330. It's an enormous thing what they did. They joined the BRICS. They joined a full partner of the BRICS.
BRICS is an acronym that refers to a group of 5 major emerging economies. You've probably heard of them: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. And now that I is a double I because Indonesia have joined. They have aligned themselves together to collaborate with each other on areas such as trade, investment, economic growth, and political coordination. In a way, you can think of it as them coming together and joining forces as a form of combating the power of the United States and their allies. BRICS, however, is not just a small alliance, it's a lot more powerful than you think. The core of BRICS is the C, China. China has a population of 1.4 billion people. Second biggest player is India, which has a population of 1.45 billion people. Russia's population is 145 million and is the largest country by land mass. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but they have a pretty strong military too. If we add all of the BRICS population together, including the newly joined Indonesia, they account for 45% of the world's population. The United States population is about 341 million, or 4% of the world. That's a big discrepancy.
In the words of, Mickey Mouse, uh-oh.
Now, if you think that this is an unfair comparison because it's one country versus an alliance of countries, okay, fair enough. Well, let's compare it to the G7. The G7, made up of Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States, has a combined population of 777 million people. This accounts for 9.7% of the world's population. Again, 9.7% versus 45% does not look very strong.
Those odds are not so good, no matter how you cut it.
Okay, well, you might argue that this is just population. It's not economic might, it's not financial capability. Okay, fair point. Let's look at that. The way we measure economic strength is through what's called GDP, Gross Domestic Product, aka how much a country produces in a given year, how much output they give.
Okay, so if you take the BRICS together now, they are about 35%, maybe a bit more, total output of the world. If you add up each of those countries' total output in a year, and you add them up, they account for 36%, more or less, of the world's output. Now let's compare that to the United States and its major allies. Those are called the G7. Okay, that used to be the dominant player of the world. That used to be what world trade meant, what they did. Together that's all of them, now account for about 28% of the world's output. Do you understand?
So in terms of output, GDP, the G7 produces less than the BRICS. They have a much smaller population and produce a decent amount less goods and services. That gives you a feel for how the world order might be changing. The once dominant nation of America and its allies is not as strong as it used to be.
Now, if you're looking to where the wealth is, you go east, not west.
Back in the day, if you were a poor third world nation and you needed money to build your infrastructure and grow your economy, there would be one country that you would call. If you needed to build a hospital or a road for transport or a school for education, you would get on the phone to a US diplomat or US business and say, hey, we need a loan here, we need your technology, or we need your resources or your know-how. But today, these third world nations are instead picking up the phone to an entirely different country.
If you're a poor third world country, as we used to call them, and you need money for a railroad, or you need to find places to sell your exports, you direct your diplomats first to go to Beijing, because that's where it's at. If you can't get a good deal there, well, you might go to London or Washington. But whatever you are doing, you're going to play them against each other. You're going to say to the Americans, oh, that's the best you offer? Let's go the other place, see what they offer. You want to know why most of the railroads being built in Africa today are being built by the Chinese? There's your answer. They got a better deal.
In Kenya, China funded the Standard Gauge Railway, which connects Nairobi to Mombasa. In Sri Lanka, China has invested in the development of the Hambantota port and Colombo port city. In Venezuela, China has helped build power plants and sign joint ventures with the state-run oil company. Across in Egypt, China are a key partner in the development of the new Suez Canal area. No matter what quote-unquote third world country you go to, no matter which continent, you will find the Chinese there.
Because you live in a country which is pretending to itself that none of this is going on. It's either never discussed or we turn it around and we say, the Chinese are becoming aggressive in the world. Huh? They're doing what exactly we did. You know how the United States became a big, powerful country? By doing to Europe what the Chinese are doing to us. It's not new, it's not different. The emperor in Rome didn't suffer the way the average people did. The emperor in Persia or the emperor in Greece, it doesn't matter. All the empires show the same phenomena. One more example, and then I'll stop and tell you what this all means. So 15 years ago, all the car companies said, hooray, here's how we hold on to our profits by making these private cars for everybody. And they all went to work to compete. And there was a winner. As of 3 years ago, one company figured out how to make the best quality electric cars and trucks at the lowest price, which is what competition is supposed to result. And I'm sure you all know the name of this company. It's the BYD Corporation. Let me do that again. B as in boy, Y as in yellow, D as in dog. BYD. Now, your faces give you away. You never heard of this place or this thing. What is it?
Of course, we all thought he was going to say Tesla. So why does Wolff say that BYD is winning the EV game? Well, they have found a way to make an electric car for a price of, well, let me ask you, how much do you think they sell this electric car for, called the Seagull? $40,000 like the Tesla Model 3? $28K like the Nissan Leaf? No, BYD Seagull sells for $11,500. That is 1/4 of the price of Tesla's cheapest car. Now, to say that they're winning the EV race, that's a controversial statement, but if you go outside of the US, BYD cars are selling like hotcakes on a cold winter's day. Okay, in China, obviously BYD are at the #1 mark, having top EV sales charts in that country for several years. But expand out to Asia. In Thailand, they are the top selling electric vehicle brand, in 2024 the BYD Dolphin led the EV market with 13,000 units sold. In Australia, they only entered the market in 2022, and now nearly a quarter of every EV sold there is BYD. In Brazil, BYD has successfully introduced both electric buses and passenger EVs into the country. In 2023, BYD's Dolphin became the best-selling electric car in Brazil. You see that these quote-unquote third world nations, let's take out Australia from that, but they're sourcing things from China because China can provide them what they want at the most competitive price.
China is winning. We are losing.
Okay, now let's fast forward to what's happening in the current day. One of the most worrisome supply chain strangleholds over the West and over the United States is, without a doubt, China's near monopoly status of critical minerals. This past week in breaking news, China suspended exports of 7 critical rare earths to all countries. Shipment stops risking shortages for US defense and tech. Trump's next move was to sign an executive order on minerals, invoking the Defense Production Act to fast-track US mining, targeting copper, uranium, and rare earths. Here's quoted, "This is a gold rush for America's future. Nobody's stopping us." The American businesses that will help solve the supply chain issue are taking on some of the world's most pressing problems, and there's big opportunity here because right now there are 0, not 1, operational tungsten mines on US soil. The Defense Department now funds rare earth projects because tungsten is indispensable for military, and like I said, there are no active mines on US soil as we speak. There is huge opportunities for the companies that can revive this industry. This is the perfect time to talk about the sponsor of today's video, American Tungsten Corp, US ticker DEMRF. It could become one of the first tungsten producers on US soil and a leading one after a full decade of no tungsten mining whatsoever domestically. Think about the potential. 0 operational mines on US soil, and China has already made export bans. China achieved control of approximately 70% of global rare earth production and 85 to 90% of the processing capacity, creating a strategic chokehold on global supply chains. American Tungsten, ticker DEMRF, is looking to help balance this out and become the first tungsten producer on US soil. They are advancing a North American past producing mine in a region with minimal environmental and regulatory barriers compared to overseas competitors. The company's flagship asset used to be the 5th operational tungsten mine in the USA. The US Department of Energy classifies tungsten as a critical material. Tungsten has the highest melting point of any metal, making it indispensable for applications that require high heat resistance, durability, and strength. AKA, it's very important. Do your homework on American Tungsten. Okay, let's get back to the BYD American thing. Why don't we see BYD and Chinese vehicles in America? They're very common in the rest of the world, other countries, but not the USA. The answer to this question should be pretty obvious. The reason you don't see these cars in America is obviously because of the tariffs slapped on the Chinese vehicles. It's very hard to compete when you pay 100% tax to Uncle Sam every time you sell a vehicle. One of the reasons why the American government needs to take so much money in the form of taxes and tariffs is because of this figure here. This graph shows you the United States total federal public debt. It simply refers to the amount of money the American government owes to other people. As of May 2023, it's a little outdated. The debt was $31.5 trillion. Today, 2025, it is $36 trillion. Just 15 years ago, it was under $10 trillion, meaning that the debt has more than tripled in a decade and a half. If you told anyone back then how huge the debt would be today, I don't think they would have believed you.
There's a name for companies that have been for several years so deeply in debt that they don't make enough profit, ready, to service their debt. That is, to pay the interest and the portion they have to repay. Now, we have a special name in economics for them. I kid you not, I didn't make this up. Zombie corporations, because they're dead. They're economically defunct. You know how they manage to survive when their profits aren't enough to cover their debts? They take on more debt to pay the debt they couldn't otherwise cover. Uh-oh, that makes them more zombie-ish next year than they were this year, which is what's happening.
So I was researching zombie companies in America. Now it's important to note that Wolff's definition was slightly off. A zombie company is one that earns just enough money to continue operating and service the debt, but are unable to pay off their debt. So they can cover their debt, but they can do no more than that. They don't necessarily have to keep borrowing to pay the debt. According to a Federal Reserve estimate published in 2021, roughly 10% of companies in the US are considered zombie firms. The share of zombie firms has been increasing over time, said Bruno Albuquerque, an economist at the IMF. This has detrimental effects on healthy firms who compete in the same sector. Now, with the rise in interest rates that we've seen over the past couple of years, CNBC wrote that many of these zombie companies have gone bankrupt. In the first 9 months of 2023, 516 companies filed for bankruptcy, according to S&P Global Intelligence. It's a weird concept that companies have so much debt to pay that all the profit they make has to go into paying off the debt. Obviously, it's not a sign of a healthy business environment. So you have high corporate debt and extremely high government debt. The big question is, who owns the debt? The US government owes the debt, it pays the debt. Who are the people that are getting paid?
Well, let me start with the government, because if you thought the world was crazy before, wait till you get this. The two biggest creditors of the United States government are Japan and China. Japan number one, China number two. A few years ago, it was the other way. China was number one, Japan was number two. The United States is the biggest debtor country in the world by countries. The second biggest creditor of the United States as the biggest debtor is the People's Republic of China. Do you understand? The United States owes China $850 billion, roughly.
Now we are getting pretty deep into the rabbit hole. You're telling me for every tax dollar that is paid by the American citizen, whether that be from the salary that they earn to the tax that they pay on a loaf of bread, a portion goes to the People's Republic of China? Well, let's go to our good friend Google just to double check this. How much money does the United States owe China? Says, as of February 2025, China holds approximately $768.6 billion of US debt, making it one of the largest foreign holders of US Treasury securities. China's holdings represents a significant portion of the total US national debt, which was around $8.6 trillion as of February 2025. Japan is the largest foreign holder of US debt, with holdings around $1.1 trillion. So let's think about it. What does owning the debt actually mean? It just means that the United States owes China money. When you owe someone money, you have to pay it back as well as interest on the money owed. So how does the US get this money to pay back what they owe to China? The answer to that one is easy. The US taxpayer, aka you.